What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Stephen Thompson, coming at you with another Inside Pitt practice report on the. Well, I guess by the time you see this, this will be the eve of the Florida State game. Florida State week coming to an end, and all that's left is game day. Will the Panthers be able to pull off a stunning upset at Acrisure Stadium, or will it be just another chapter in a long season? We're going to find out, but we'll preview the game a little bit, talk about what you're going to see actually on the field on Saturday afternoon after our final conversation of the week with Pat Narduzzi. He offered a little bit of insight into how he thinks Florida State will attack him, what Pitt needs to do to win, and just how they're handling this challenge. So we'll start with what Pitt needs to do on defense, and we'll start with that Florida State offense, which is one of the best in the country's hands down, one of the most talented I think groups in the country. I mean, from quarterback to receiver to running back and tight end, like their skill positions are as good as anyone's in the country. They've got NFL guys up and down that roster, but we're going to focus in on the receivers a little bit because that passing game can get really explosive. You know the names probably if you're watching this. Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson are their two biggest, wide receivers, the two biggest passing threats. But don't forget about Jaheim Bell, too, at tight end. He's a real good player too. I think all of these guys have 300 plus yards receiving. Coleman, I think north of 600. I'm not. I don't have his numbers up in front of me right now, but Coleman's got 9 touchdowns. Wilson has 2 and 500 yards. Bell's got close to 350 and a couple touchdowns as well. These guys are not only ridiculously skilled, but they are massive, just physically imposing guys. Coleman's 6'4", Wilson is 6'7", Bell is 6'3". And then you also got to think about, as far as, skill positions and pass catchers go, like even the running backs each have all 3 of their top running backs each have 13 or more catches this year. But think about those receivers, Pitt's starting corners, they're kind of 3 starters, AJ Woods, MJ Devonshire, Marquez Williams. None of them are taller than 5'11". So this is a big task for them. But we've seen them handle big wideouts before. So how have they done it? Well, I think it starts with physicality. These guys are, I don't know if I would use the term handsy. Handsy might be actually a good word for it, but these guys love to be physical. That's how they're taught to play. It's what they need to do. When you're playing a ton of man coverage on the outside on an island by yourself, it's what you need to do. So you've got to get your hands on these guys. You've got to make them uncomfortable. You cannot let them get free releases because then they will use their size against you. If you can hit them early, you can neutralize that size advantage a little bit. And if you can make them fight a little bit for every catch, that's going to play to your advantage if you're a smaller corner like Williams, who's only 5'9", or Woods and Devonshire, who are both 5'11". I've seen them do this before. I think mostly about that Clemson game from 2021 or the West Virginia game last year. Bo Collins and Justin Ross for Clemson, Caden Prather, Sam James, and Bryce Ford Wheaton. For West Virginia were all big guys as well, not just tall, but, had some weight and muscle to them as well. And against those guys, the first thing you notice is them playing a lot of press, getting real physical with them, trusting their speed a little bit to make up to make up ground if they get beat off the line because they are pressing so hard. And it worked pretty well. Ford Wheaton, I know, had a big game against Pitt, but, they certainly made him uncomfortable. Collins and Ross, I mean, that Clemson passing offense was, there were a lot of reasons why it struggled a little bit, but part of it was because the Panthers played coverage against them. They're ready to do this, I think. I think they are ready for this challenge. The one thing I think, that you'll see is that Pitt isn't going to change anything schematically to help out these corners. They are going to have to stand up to these receivers on their own. The receiving threats and offensive threats in the run game are too numerous to give anybody, really anybody, safety help over the top. I think you're going to end up seeing a lot of that Delta package that you hear. I know Chris Peak knows a lot about it over at Panther Lair, but puts, a nickel corner basically on the field. Gives the Panthers the opportunity to put their 3 best cover guys on the field and in the game as much as possible. I think the way Florida State plays, they are going to try to throw it on Pitt. They're going to try to put those corners on islands and see what they can do with their, I'd venture to say a pretty significant advantage in talent on the outside against those Pitt corners. I also think the run defense has turned a little bit of a corner, or at least started to. So I don't think they're going to be as run heavy, at least, kind of traditional straight up the middle. Maybe Jordan Travis gets some read options or scrambles or something like that. But I think for the most part, they're going to try to throw the ball on Pitt. I think they believe that they can really take advantage of an advantage there. But like I said, these Panthers corners are tough. These DBs have been here before, and they should know what kind of challenge they're walking into. Flipping over to the other side of the ball, talking about Christian Bayer, sometimes you forget when you're speaking with him, interviewing him, or just listening to him speak that this guy is a redshirt sophomore going into just his fourth start. He speaks with a kind of confidence and purpose that makes him seem much older. But in South Bend last weekend, we saw him look real young, or about as young as he actually is, and inexperienced as he actually is. He said that Notre Dame was real eager to change and disguise coverages, slow down his ability to process what kind of defense he's looking at, and then after the snap, they'd blitz him relentlessly and really furiously to speed up his turtle clock, and that worked. He admitted himself to feeling a little overwhelmed at times, feeling like he was rushed, and it was a pretty honest evaluation of his play, quite honestly, was the first thing that struck me. I'm not sure many in his spot would be willing to say, yeah, I kind of folded when I got faced with pressure in this situation. But he's young, he knows it doesn't define him, and he's willing to acknowledge it and move on. I think that's significant in its own right, but it is also significant in the fact that teams are going to try to do it again. So he's got to learn from it. Narduzzi and Bayer said that they expect Florida State to do the exact same thing, challenge him mentally, more than physically, and make him stand in there, take hits, deal with pressure, and try to get around it. We wrote a little bit about that at InsideThePanthers.com. You can read about that. But we also talked a little bit about it, I believe, in a practice report earlier this week. But it's going to be a recurring thing until Bayer proves that he can beat it all the time. He was able to do that to a certain extent against Louisville and Wake, but man, this is a different animal. And this is probably even a similarly significant step up from even Notre Dame, who's already really good, especially defensively. So, knowing that pressure is going to come hard and fast at their still pretty green quarterback, Pitt's going to try to put together a plan. They've have already put together a plan. It's really nothing groundbreaking. You have to assume you'll see some more contributions in protection from the running backs and the tight ends. They'll have to chip those really good defensive ends that Florida State has, Jared Verse and Pat Payton. But they're also going to make sure that Bayer keeps getting the ball out of his hands quick. Frank Signetti talked extensively about that in our conversation with him earlier this week, and I think it's something that Bayer's done pretty well, at least through these first 3 starts. Yeah, 3 starts. I think it's when he holds onto the ball too long, that's when the decisions start to get a little worse, and when he starts to, turn the ball over, make some poor decisions like he did against Notre Dame. This is a big test for Veyer, not something that he necessarily has to pass. Like, we're not going to grade him solely on this performance against this team in this spot. That'd be pretty unfair for a guy like him, or a young guy in his spot. But, seeing how he reacts to the situation and this opponent and the game plan that Florida State's going to throw at him will kind of give you an idea of just how far he has to go, and really how far the rest of the team and the offense has to go before they're ready to compete with the big boys, before they're ready to compete with a team that is this talented and kind of knows where their weaknesses are. So how they can address weaknesses week to week when they have been exposed on tape is a pretty significant test for Veyer and the rest of this offense. And the last kind of thing I want to touch on kind of came towards the end of our conversation with Pat Narduzzi today. This is speaking of Thursday. You'll see this on a Friday. But Narduzzi went on a little bit of a rant. Wasn't necessarily an angry one, but he talked about it for a while. And he talked about the 4-game limit on players who want to redshirt. So players got to play in less than 4 games, or I believe 4 games or less, if they want to use their redshirt for a season. This has created some tricky math for Pitt, who has some young talent that I think is probably ready to play and get some reps in right now, and they need those right now, especially with the team, sitting at 2-6. But when you play guys, you're also in danger of, the injuries also play into this as well. But guys are perhaps in danger of not being able to redshirt this year with just 4 games left on the schedule. A bunch of them have played already, as far as true freshmen go, and you got to be judicious with who you use those red shirts on, because there may be guys who aren't ready right now, but you want to give them some experience, but you also want them to have, their full wealth of eligibility down the road. And I wrote about what Pat Narduzzi thinks about that 4-game rule. He doesn't necessarily love it, but you can read about that at InsideThePanthers.com. But there are a couple names that he thought, should you should expect to see as we get down the home stretch of this season, and the Panthers start to look ahead a little bit. Like I said, uh, as far as guys who cannot redshirt next year, I mean, Kenny Johnson, obviously, B.J. Williams, Jordan Bass, Rasheem Biles, Braylon Lovelace. All those guys have played, I believe, each of them 6 games, if not more. But there's a whole host of basically the rest of the 2023 recruiting class still has, at least 3 games that they can burn before they reach that 4-game limit. There are 2 guys, though, that Pat Narduzzi pointed out specifically saying that he wants to get them in, but is struggling a little bit as far as how to play them, how to use them down the stretch of the season while managing their redshirt limit, their redshirt games limit. That's Israel Polk, a wide receiver, and Cruz Brookins, a defensive back. Like I said, he likes what he sees from them in practice. Polk's been a guy even going back to spring ball. Brookins was he was not a mid-year enrollee. He was summer enrollee. But he has come along pretty quickly. He's a guy even going back to training camp that Narduzzi was real impressed with. But he wants to put them in. Special team, how you kind of get their feet wet, and then you get them in on defense, offense, whichever side of the ball they're on. Polk has 2 games already under his belt this season. Brookins has 0. But he doesn't want to waste these guys or waste a game for these guys against their redshirt limit on just a handful of plays. So these are guys who also play at positions that have been real healthy, and they've got some veterans there. So it's not super easy to find ways to get them in right now. First and foremost, I think this is a way of just, Narduzzi, by announcing this, is a way of sort of tacitly saying, we are looking towards 2024. I think they've already said that with some of their personnel decisions, and that's okay. They definitely should. But, I think it's also just, plays into the rest of this season. You're going to see more young guys. That's been a fact of, that even happened last year with the way they put in Dayon Hayes and Javon McIntyre, PJ O'Brien, gave some of those guys some more burn at the end of the year, kind of looking towards who they would lose and what they might need for next year. They're going to give guys reps based on, if they see them as a long-term part of the future, or even, part of the short-term future in 2024. So, I don't expect either of these guys to make a huge impact, especially in the Florida State game. But, as we get later in the year, I suspect you're going to see more and more of these guys. And, the more of these young guys that you see play right away can give you a little bit of a hint as to who the coaching staff is highest on looking towards the future. With that, I'm headed out of here. Thanks so much for tuning into another Inside Pitt Practice Report. Make sure to stay tuned with us through the end of this week. We'll have plenty of coverage of that Florida State game and some post-game reaction as well. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers. Find all of our reporting from the game this Saturday and beyond at InsideThePanthers.com. Appreciate you all tuning in.